The Minnesota Timberwolves are going to be interesting this season. After acquiring Rudy Gobert during the offseason in a relatively shocking deal, it seems like the T-Wolves are looking to make a deep playoff push this next season. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports, I make opinionative NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. The Minnesota Timberwolves have built a nice young core for themselves. With a core centered around Anthony Edwards, Karl-Anthony Towns, and D'Angelo Russell, and more recently Rudy Gobert, the T-Wolves appear to be headed in the right direction. But even considering all the talent that the Timberwolves have on the roster, I'm especially excited to see what Anthony Edwards could do this next season. Because in his previous 2 seasons, he played at a very high level of NBA basketball, and I fully expect Edwards to continue on that trajectory of just continuously improving his game each and every season. And out of all the players on the T-Wolves, I think Edwards is probably the best player on the team. If not at this point, he definitely will be in the future. The only player that you could say is better than him is, I guess, Karl-Anthony Towns at this point, as he's also a very, very high level talent. But in the end, I just believe in Anthony Edwards so much that I truly believe he's going to be one of the best players in the league within the next few seasons. But there's a bunch of different reasons for why I'm so high on Anthony Edwards. Starting off with his 3-point shooting ability, this is definitely something that isn't necessarily the best, but at the same time, it is decent, I would say. He has an ability to hit that catch and shoot 3-point jump shot. He also has a decent ability to cross over, sidestep, and step back from that 3-point range. He also could pull up from that 3-point range, although he doesn't really do that all that often. But moving on to his mid-range shooting, Edwards definitely has a better mid-range shot than his 3-point shot. He has a nice one-dribble pull-up. He has a decent post turnaround fadeaway. He has a nice ability to cross over into a mid-range jump shot, sidestep, or step back. He has a nice floater within the lane, and overall from that mid-range area, I would definitely say he's a pretty good shooter. But now moving on to Edwards' best ability, that would be his driving and finishing ability. Once driving all the way to the basket, Edwards does a phenomenal job at utilizing that crazy level athleticism that he does possess in order to get posterizing dunks over whoever's in the paint. It doesn't matter, he's that athletic. But even besides getting posterizing dunks, he also utilizes that athleticism very effectively in order to finish around players with crafty layups, either his left or right hand, or he also has the power and finesse to finish through players and get N1 finishes that way as well. Now in terms of his passing and playmaking ability, I would also say it's pretty decent considering the position that he does play, and it was nice to see improvements from year 1 to year 2, but of course in the long run that would be something that you would like to see him improve upon a little bit more. Now on the defensive side of the court, Edwards definitely has a nice ability to defend. Now he doesn't always play great defense consistently, but he definitely has the build and the athleticism in order to play defense at a high level consistently in the future. Now in terms of the other 2 guys, in D'Angelo Russell and Karl-Anthony Towns, they are still relatively young and definitely have room for improvement, and I would expect them to slightly improve their games season after season. But overall for those 2 guys, I feel like we basically know who they are at this point, and they're not going to be completely different players in 5 years from now than they are currently. But with Anthony Edwards, I definitely could see him being a completely different level player in 5 seasons from now. But now let's get into the question of the video, which is why I think the Timberwolves are going to be a very interesting team next season. Now before we dive into it, what do I actually mean when I say the Timberwolves are going to be an interesting team? Well, obviously as I mentioned before, I definitely think this Timberwolves team has a ton of talent on the roster, but with the acquisition of Rudy Gobert, I think it's somewhat of an interesting fit to say the least. In some aspects, it makes a ton of sense, as last season the Timberwolves definitely did struggle defensively, and Rudy is one of, if not the best defensive centers in the league, so obviously that should help alleviate that problem next season for the T-Wolves, but at the same time, it is somewhat interesting in terms of the fit. Now, what I mean by that is offensively, Rudy is certainly limited. He doesn't really have all that many abilities besides the pick and lob offense, and maybe at times somewhat of a post-up game, but besides that, obviously he doesn't have any sort of a jump shot, and I think that would be especially hard on Karl-Anthony Towns, because although Towns obviously has a nice ability to hit that 3-point jump shot, alongside with a nice mid mid-range game, when Towns is truly at his best, he does a lot of his damage in the post. Whether that means a nice little post hook or a post turnaround fadeaway or just putting up a layup even, when Towns is doing that consistently, I feel like that's when he's at his best. But having a guy like Rudy Gobert on this team is just going to make that ability a lot more difficult for Towns, because now whoever's guarding Rudy could easily just double team Towns, and obviously it would just make it more difficult. And even on the defensive side, I also think it would be an interesting fit for Towns as well, as obviously Towns isn't necessarily the best defender, even when he's defending centers. So if he's defending power forwards now, who are going to be a little more athletic and a little more agile, it could be somewhat of an issue for Towns to keep up with those guys. Now, obviously Towns is known as a pretty agile center, but at the same time, as I said, he is a center and he isn't necessarily the best defender. So it definitely does remain to be seen how well he would be able to consistently defend power forwards out there. Now, it would seem like the most obvious solution to this problem is just to mismatch those two guys' minutes to the point where either Karl-Anthony Towns or Rudy Gobert is playing center at all times. But the issue with that is late in games, you're probably going to want to have both of those guys out there, as both of those guys obviously would be in your best starting five. So it's definitely interesting in terms of fit for Karl-Anthony Towns at the very least. Now, honestly, besides that factor, I do think the addition of Rudy makes a lot of sense. Obviously, the main reason being he's a great defender. The T-Wolves struggled defensively last year, so it's probably going to help alleviate that issue. I also think the two-man game between a guy in D'Angelo Russell and Rudy Gobert could be pretty effective next season for the Timberwolves. Also, a two-man game between Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert could also be pretty effective. But obviously, when you talk about a bad fit, especially for one of, if not the best players on your team, that's of course going to be a huge issue. But there definitely is a potential that maybe it seems like a mismatch on paper, but on the court they actually work out very well together and just figure it out. And obviously that's something that a lot of Timberwolves fans are hoping for, so I guess we'll see what happens next season in regards to that. But overall, I am very interested to see how good this Timberwolves team could get. A lot of these players on this roster are pretty young and ascending players, so I definitely have high expectations for the T-Wolves this next season. But even besides that, I also have high expectations for them in the long-term future as well. But the T-Wolves had very talented teams in the past, but they were never truly able to live up to expectations, so hopefully for this team they currently have, they will be able to do so in the long-term future at the very least. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think this Timberwolves team could not only be very good this season, but also have a pretty bright long-term future, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.